What? Who is this man?
The shirt. I feel so uncomfortable. It's not even funny.
You couldn't even get the intro out of your mouth, James, before the mocking started. Believe me, there's some very fast fingers starting right now.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Town Square. I am James Azar. Joining me, my co-host, the awesome Eddie, is back from his week-long off-the-grid hiatus. How was it, Eddie?
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, I was down in Costa Rica at a meditation retreat, totally off the grid. Actually, not quite totally off the grid. I did spy on you. I had to see what the Tech Town Square was all about. So, yeah, and I caught a little bit of Paisley, so good man. It was lovely. It was refreshing, and I got straight back into a 14-hour day the next day. You know what it's like after a vacation. It's like, was it worth it? Beating back the emails. Matt, all of our eyes, my friend. You can never undo what you have now seen.
What you see now is the absolute part of this. We've got wow, just wow from Paul. Yeah. This is what I do for my brothers in arms. Go donate to the Wounded Warrior Project. Please continue to support this great cause. We're at $2,650 in donations, $2,651 in donations. And the link is right here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Please click it, go donate. Any donation, even $5, $10, help this awesome organization support the brave men and women of our nation's armed forces. So please go and donate to this awesome cause. I know that when they see this episode, the folks at Wounded Warrior, there's going to be a lot of laughs here. Paul says, I am committed. I am committed, right? I committed to this, man. I can't back down now. People have put in their hard-earned money.
Or he's going to be committed because that shirt's going to drive him nuts.
It absolutely is. So welcome to today's show where we're going to be talking about AI and bias in tech. Right. And the baseline for our conversation is Coded Bias, this documentary that's trending on Netflix, talking about coded bias, essentially AI bias in AI, in machine learning, in facial recognition. It's a very, very interesting topic. So the Tech Town Square isn't always about cyber, right? We've always gone down the cyber route, but cyber is a symptom of a greater piece of technology. And today we're going to talk a little bit about AI, machine learning, and bias. Sandra says hello. Hey, Sandra.
Hello, Sandra.
How do you like the shirt? That's the question.
That's the big question. Yeah, and I'm pleased we are going to. Cyber is going to be part of technology always, but look, we've got James's other shows for that. We've got the CyberHub podcast, so that's where you need to tune in for cyber. For this show, of course, we'll touch on cyber from time to time, and because we're a couple of cyber dudes, we tend to lean into that. I'm going to do my best over the upcoming weeks to lean us back out of it because technology is what we originally wanted to engage with in this town square. And really, it was around the time of the election and the potential for election interference that I think a lot of people needed a town square to say, hey, look, if there was going to be interference with these Dominion voting machines, this is how it would have to happen. So just putting some intelligence behind some of the headlines that you see in mainstream media. And then it progressed to this, which is, look, we should be talking about driverless car technology. We should be talking about the fact that they have drones with defibrillators sitting on rooftops of high rises so that when somebody dials 911 and they're having a heart attack or somebody's witnessing somebody having a heart attack and an ambulance can't get there in time, a drone will take off and land because of the GPS right next to you. And if you can click a button with a waiver, this all sounds rather scary, and this is why we want to have a town square, you can use the defibrillator to save somebody's life. Technology is amazing. And James came up with the wonderful idea to discuss this documentary, Coded Bias, and more than just the documentary, artificial intelligence and algorithms, are they biased? So, James, why don't I, in a moment, we're going to do maybe a few more kind of entry, hello, everybody things, but I would love to set the stage for that documentary, which I watched just today to get ready for this, and then kind of give my opinion, and we'll kick off from there.
Yeah, go ahead. I've put the link where to go to donate, so you guys actually can see that on the screen if you haven't looked at your notes. But yeah, I'm wearing Paisley tonight.
And Sandra says, love the shirts. This is not the point, Sandra. We're trying to make him look as hideous as possible. So these
episodes are going to live forever.
we can do better than this then. If we're getting comments, love the shirt, right? Then we need to go with some other kind of Paisley. I'm going to start hunting myself. All right. Well, listen, thank you for being brave and putting on that wonderful shirt, James. Because I'm a Paisley guy, I love it. Clearly, Sandra does too, but hopefully the other fellas in the room do not. So, Coded Bias, interesting documentary. It's currently streaming on Netflix, and it's the premise is this: that we have a bunch of PhD, MIT type students, activists in New York City, journalists who are concerned about bias in artificial intelligence. Not just concerned about artificial intelligence. I have concern about artificial intelligence. It's actually not the bias that's being currently presented. Maybe we'll get to that, kind of why I think artificial intelligence is a little bit too much Terminator and why I'm not keen on it. The documentary focused on bias on things like gender and race. Not things like, I think those were the only two things. Right, that's the bias that the claim by the activists putting the documentary together were.
Well, they're not activists; they're researchers. Let's be honest about it, though. They're researchers.
The blue-haired lady was
smart people.
Yeah,
who are in great schools.
Sure. So the MIT PhD candidate, Joy, wonderful smile on this human being, definitely. The lady with the blue hair, I'm pretty sure she was an activist, though. I think she was a journalist / activist. But
no, she was an author. She wrote a book.
Oh, that's right. She did. She wrote a book.
Something of Math Destruction. Kathy O'Neill.
That's right. That's right. It was, something of mathematical or algorithmic destruction. Okay. So what I wasn't seeing, though, is, number one, I accept that there is bias in the world. Yes. Number two, the point that they made of Caucasian men being the people that write algorithms, not quite accurate, actually, because a lot of Asian men do, but men, yes, primarily write algorithms. So what they're supposing is that the natural bias inside those human beings would have come out into the algorithm. I can't connect those dots yet. I haven't been able to see that because they first started talking about facial recognition. And so if you're teaching a computer to recognize a face, any face, what essentially you're doing, and you remember with your iPhone, you did this, right? You sort of turned your face around and you got it to take pictures of your face, and eventually it picked up on your face, and then that was it. Where's the bias in the algorithm? The algorithm is simply looking at Eddie Doyle's face specifically. It's looking for what your features are. I'm not seeing that it's biased toward me because I'm male versus toward my wife, who's got exactly the same phone because she's female. So I haven't been able to connect the dots on that in the documentaries. That's my first point that I would love to discuss.
So let's discuss that. So one, Matt doesn't agree with you.
Why not, Matt? Jump in, man. Yeah.
And I'm going to join Matt on this one. I also don't agree with you, and I'll tell you why. So here's the thing about what you're talking about. We can't compare Apple or Samsung's facial ID on your phone as an algorithm because it's not an algorithm. All that is a scanner. It's not really facial recognition. Unlocking your iPhone, excuse me, I'm making some noise here, with the facial ID isn't really recognizing your face. It's recognizing your face, but it's scanning it.
It took a picture of me.
It took a picture of you. It scanned your face. It's created a pattern. And then every time you go to unlock your phone, it sees that pattern. Right? Okay. So that's really important to note. I'm going to keep the Matt Lee don't agree up here because I know Matt's writing something here in just a moment. It'll come right out.
Sure.
But that's one aspect.
Okay.
Now here comes the second one. And I think this second one's really important, right? When you're talking about AI facial recognition, when you're talking about not scanning your face, but someone actually not only scanning your face, but using an algorithm to recognize you and then purportedly show you something about yourself. So in the movie, in the coded bias, she directly points out to the mirror product. The mirror product is a technological mirror that you hook a webcam to, and it sees your face, and then I want to be Tiger Woods. That's my inspiration, right? And it puts Tiger Woods' face over mine, and now I'm looking in the mirror and I see Tiger Woods.
All right.
Right? And that specific technology wouldn't recognize her face until she put a white mask on. And she proved it during the documentary. So agree or not, it's one of those where, you know, it was there, we saw it, I believed it, and I still believe it because I believe that there is some bias with the way technology is being tested.
So allow me to respond, and then I want to get to Matt's comment there. My response is, surely that is simply a function that there is not enough data in the database to measure everybody's face yet. Surely it's just a problem of the algorithms are catching up, not a bias, just a lack of information.
So you could argue that, but here's the deal. Is it a lack of information? Because the data initially was that 98% of matches in facial recognition software were wrong.
But it doesn't make sense that Tiger Woods, who has a African-American face, and then the lady saying she had to put a white mask on to be recognized, that doesn't line up to me.
So it does, because when she would put her face in front of the mirror, in front of the camera wasn't recognizing her face until she had white outlines. So that's a technology issue where the camera would only recognize white outlines of someone's face. I want to get to Matt's comment here before we lose track. So my brother is one of the people writing the algorithms. You're exactly right. Teaching an embodied agent to recognize a magazine stand that is only a magazine stand because it is a bin we put magazines in. The opportunity for bias in those plays, I agree. And the banking decision or insurance algorithms that are written with a purpose in mind, I don't agree. I think bias can certainly be injected in that instance.
Banking decision or insurance. Okay, in the banking decision or insurance algorithms that are written with a purpose in mind, I don't agree.
So there is an aspect to banking and insurance algorithms that we'll talk about from a bias perspective. That bias perspective is predominantly the data set history. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. You know, Eddie and I kind of had a few conversations about this today, and we didn't want to get into the discussion too far. We're like, save it for the show, save it for the show. And I want to save it for the show. But before I get to my point, my brother from another mother, El Bayari, Ahmad, Assalamu alaikum, shalom, brother, pull my ear. Thank you. Thank you. So here's the deal. And only he'll get what I just said. Only he will get what I just said. So here's the deal. When you look at bias in algorithms, right, in agents, in the things that recognize specific aspects of someone's facial features or identity. So I don't want to get stuck on the mirror example. The mirror example for her was a trigger.
Right, to do some research.
To do some more research. And in her research, she found some very, very interesting facts. One of which was that, like, Amazon's facial recognition product, Amazon Recognition, right, was recognizing male faces at 98% accuracy, white males.
Right.
Females was at like 92%, white females. But then African American males was like 68%, and African American females was lower than that. So right. So the algorithms weren't really shaped to deal with that. Part of that is because the people that are programming it aren't thinking about that bias, not because they're racist, right? Not because they mean to be that way. So I want to get it, like, motive is really important. Motive is really important here. It's the fact that when you look in an average tech company today and you look in their engineering and architect room, it's predominantly white and Asian males.
Right. But so I 100% agree. I don't think there's a nefarious intent here at all. But I'm still not seeing it, mate, because surely if people are building algorithms to do facial recognition at Amazon, they simply need a larger data set in order to recognize female African-American faces. Now, because African Americans make up 14% of the population, and let's say male and female is 50-50, I don't really know. So that would be 7% of the population. Surely we just need more data into the databases so that the algorithms can become more perfected. It's just a matter of time, right?
So maybe, I mean, there's the second part to Matt's comment here, which talks about banking and insurance algorithms. So where Matt and I disagree. So here's where I disagree with Matt. The data sets that are being used in banking and insurance decisions are based on historical machine learning algorithms. So what happens is, if you look over the last 30 years, if you look since the 1960s to 2020, and if you take that data set, and banks take those data sets, insurance companies, they data hoard, right? Like, we know that data is being hoarded. Even in the last 10 years, the African-American average household income from 2010 to 2020 went up by like 28%.
Okay.
Right? So if you're basing your data on 2010 and you go, on average, African Americans tend to earn $50,000 a year, but now in 2020, they earn 30% more, but the data set is still looking at 2010 or 2011 or 2012. It's looking at old data set. The machine isn't picking up to the fact that the trend is really increasing because more African Americans go to college, more African Americans get good jobs, more African Americans are breaking through barriers and are able to go, and more women are doing the same, and more Latinos are doing that, right? So now you're looking at that and they're going, well, maybe. And the biggest example of this was in law enforcement, right? In facial recognition. And I thought that to me was kind of what was very striking.
Well, and I was going to ask the question then, and you've gotten close to it, but what I'm wondering is, how does AI impact people's lives? If it is bias, where's the negative impact? What is actually happening to human beings that is bad if it's biased? And I'm still saying if. And we're getting too many kind of like, well, we're not getting enough "that shirt's hideously ugly" comments to James here. So I want to stoke the fire a little bit and tell people that we're not supposed to be complimenting them on this shirt.
So yes, so Paul here says, how is this different from license plate recognition? We have a preconceived notion of the results, limited options, so we have preconceived notions. Yeah, but license plate is something that's generated by the government, by the Department of Motor Vehicle or Department of Driver Services. So we have a database that we're checking it up against. And so there's logic there. There can't be any preconceived notions around license plate like there can be around your face, your DNA, and so forth.
What's okay. There's and Matt put up another comment, Clearview ? I don't know what that is. Back to Eddie's point.
Clearview AI. So Clearview AI is a company that does AI algorithms. They use AI to build AI engines. And it's been proven that Clearview AI, especially in their facial recognition software, has tremendous amount of bias. So Clearview AI, in that documentary, your home country, right? The country you left to come to a better country, right? Mm-hmm. Where we don't use "use" in every single word. And, we don't say mate, we say bro. Or, we don't say bruv, right? We say bro.
And we don't wear Paisley shirts.
And we don't wear Paisley shirts unless it's for a fundraiser. Right? And we don't drink an afternoon tea with milk because that's just not right. So when you look at so the police was experimenting with parking a car that was recognizing everyone's face, and then it was trying to match it to a database. And if the person was wanted or something, then cops were coming and approaching that person. And in one case in the documentary, they approached a 14-year-old black kid.
Sure. But I don't think that's bias. I think that's mistaken. It's just
but it's not accurate. But it doesn't do that to a white person. It doesn't do that to a white person. That was the point. Because they sat there all day, and even the human rights organization that is now part of what came out today in the EU about facial recognition laws and the privacy of your face in public spaces and from government spying.
100% agree with all that.
Even they came out and said, we see this happening with white people, but the percentage with white people is about 10%. The percentage with anyone who's of Asian, Muslim, or African-American descent, anyone who's a minority, the error rate is like 6 times higher.
Yeah, I didn't see that I didn't see that in the show. If that's just what the UN came out with today.
Not the UN, the EU.
The EU came out with today. Yeah, oh, but it is. Which comment was that? Oh, but it is bias, probably, right?
Yeah, but license plates are license plates. Like, I get what Paul's trying to say, but a license plate is a preconceived data that's generated by the state. Your face, my face, our facial DNAs, the government has nothing to do with it. That's our family's DNA.
Yeah, I suspect. Okay, so China probably has some amazing facial recognition, don't they?
They do.
I would love to see, I don't think we'll ever get a chance to see it, a data set of how inaccurate or biased their algorithms are against, let's say, Caucasian and African American or African people versus Asian people. Because I maintain this point still. I'm not seeing that it's biased. You could be saying it's biased because there is a greater data set of Caucasian faces for the algorithms to study. And therefore, it makes more mistakes with a non-Caucasian face. Oh, okay, that's a fault in the algorithm. I wouldn't call that a bias. Bias is such a triggering word to me because of what you had to do a little earlier, is kind of that disclaimer with the people working at these organizations are not doing this through intent, right? So and I certainly would agree with that. But I think that it's majority bias. Right? So if these algorithms have been developed in Africa and the large data pool of faces for the algorithms to study would obviously be African faces, I think, and let's say there's 10% Caucasian faces in Africa, I don't know what the percentage is, then I'll bet you it would make more errors with the Caucasian faces, simply because it doesn't have a large enough data set to study. Now, does that mean there are real world consequences to it? Yes. But I don't like the word bias because there's just something wrong, and I have to work it out on this call live. It's more the fact that the algorithms are broken and they need to be improved.
So there's a point to that. Matt here says that Clearview is the basis of that entire endeavor. The crossover error rate is too high, false positives and false negatives. I agree with that. The crossover rate of mistakes in the facial recognition AI. You know, I put out a survey today that you, Eddie, took and plenty of other people took on the idea of how comfortable would you be if a company took your face and now all of a sudden your biometrics became how you had access to everything, and would you be for it or against it? And it's overwhelmingly 2-1 against it.
I was actually okay with it. So I
know. So what was really interesting for me is the people who are okay with it are the people who I like to call like they're early adapters, right? They're like, I don't mind it. I'm an early adapter, right?
Right.
But at the same time, when you go back and you look at the people who are a little bit less quick to jump the gun, they're a little different. Their responses were all, I'm not for it. That's just not the right thing for me. I wouldn't consent because of I don't know that I trust my company with my facial recognition data. It's my DNA.
Yeah, bring up Paul's comment here on software programming. I want to read this one out. He says, no, but the software programmer has preconceived notions. Right, absolutely. Bias exists, not denying that. We all have it. What if the alphabet had 30 letters? Bias is not necessarily bad. It just alters the outcome. This is, thank you. You're helping me with the vocabulary of what I'm trying to understand here, Paul. This is how the Enigma machine was compromised in World War II. Yeah, and that's funny because, I have an inherent trust for the company that I work for. So if they wanted to use facial recognition, I used to work for a data center. And so I gave up my biometrics for that organization, and I had to because I wanted to work there. So I just got a little bit comfortable with it. I in the big picture, I'm actually not that keen on AI. So I'm sort of contradicting myself a little bit here. I don't mind you're taking a picture of me and this is how I'm going to get into my secure facility. But yeah, Matt, exactly. The problem comes when all of a sudden the person in charge has the power to do something with the artificial intelligence. I'm also on the side of Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Sam Harris and these guys who are saying, I think it's very scary because we don't know what's going to happen when AI actually does get birthed. Because we don't have AI right now.
We have narrow AI today, right? We have very narrow AI today.
Machine learning, I like to call it.
No. We have machine learning and we have narrow AI.
What's the
We have
difference?
some level of so machine learning is looking at performance and adjusting the model as it goes. Narrow AI is the actual artificial intelligence. So that kind of goes to the Microsoft. I think it was the Microsoft Ty. Was it Ty who was kind of like, that was narrow AI. So Ty was learning. They put Ty on Twitter. And
so narrow AI, the algorithm is making a decision. That's what you mean. Some kind of
correct. And it's learning, and it's not learning smartly. It's learning everything that's bad. It doesn't know how to discern information yet.
Okay.
So it doesn't know. So if you looked at at Microsoft's Ty, within 16 hours it became racist.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, anyone spending 16 hours on Twitter would be racist at this point. To one side or the other, Twitter's a garbage pool. Like, I think we should dox Twitter out of business. Like, that is one company I pray fails. I think Twitter's a garbage heap.
Right.
I do. Like, I don't have a personal Twitter page. I have a CyberHub podcast page on Twitter, and I don't even post there. I don't go on Twitter. I think Twitter is garbage. Right.
So, that's right. And for the people that need a reminder, the Microsoft Twitter bot was called Ty. After 13 hours, 16 hours, they had to turn it off because it became racist. It was basically just picking up everything that it was hearing and then pushing up messages. Why I don't like the idea of full-blown AI is because once we've crossed the line, we cannot go back.
Yeah, but we're going there anyways.
We are.
What I want people to understand is, and I want to get through these comments here in just a second, and I want to address the Uyghur Muslims in China, because China was a big part of surveillance there. And you saw how China uses facial recognition, right? Where everything that you buy in a store in China is pretty much your face and a pin, right?
Yeah, that's right. To get online, you need to give up your face now in China.
So they know it's you.
Yeah.
Right? So this is really challenging. Like, so I'll tell you this, when we talk about corporations with biometrics, to me, that's the definition of corporate surveillance. And I know that as a CISO, I know that I can't defend that data wholeheartedly. So I advise against biometrics, right? Because imagine what would happen if I have to do a data breach notification to my employees. Hey, someone hacked our biometric database and took your face, your retina, all that detail, and now they can create a 3D mask of your face.
Yeah. But it's coming, I'm afraid.
To accurate proportions.
Right.
I don't know that I could look at my team, and I don't know that those employees would be comfortable looking at the company the same way again. And I want to get to comments here. So what about the Uyghur Muslims? Yeah, what about them, man? Free Hong Kong, and China is the largest human rights abuse country in the world, and they need to be held accountable to what they do. Paul agreed with something we said a bit earlier, and he says it is the impact of the, I think, error. Is that what he means?
I think it's error, maybe.
Yeah, errors. There we go. Errors.
Yeah.
Matt would be okay with a palm vein scan. I don't know.
What is that?
I wouldn't be okay with that. I wouldn't be okay with a palm vein scan.
Describe what that is, James. I don't know what that is.
So a palm vein scan is essentially, they have it in Israel and in other countries. Like when I flew to Australia, I had to scan my palm on the machine to enter Australia. It essentially scans your entire hand. That to me is also a little bit invasive. I think it's about accuracy for Matt when it comes to facial recognition. I agree. Accuracy isn't there. And imagine once you get beards or people age, your face still changes, right? Your fingerprint doesn't evolve. Your fingerprint stays the same.
And your iris and your heartbeat, yeah.
Right, but there's two things in your body that as you grow older still change. Your nose and your ears.
Right.
And they're going to either grow larger. They don't typically grow smaller. I've yet to meet an old person with a small nose.
Benjamin Button.
Yeah. So I'm concerned a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But you do trust them with the Paisley. That's narrow AI is a good way to say it. We do not have general AI. We don't have such a thing, right? Matt says, jokes on them, my face is hideous.
That's why he's going to keep the beard on, then all of a sudden he's going to shave and just be incognito. That's the new incognito mode, right? You wear a beard constantly and then you shave. Yeah.
Paul says, yes, it's like a fingerprint. It is. It's the same as facial. And that kind of takes us to that point here as we're kind of clearing these comments today, which is the law. So here's where I want to take this discussion. We're going to go a little bit into criminal justice, a little bit, because I think what I took out of this documentary, there was some stuff in there that I thought was very convenient that had no men on the entire thing, which I felt was a little, misleading. Now, there could be a few things. One, maybe no man agreed to come on the show, on the documentary, and speak about it because they felt like it was a propaganda piece, right?
Yeah, my opinion, I want you to get to the legal part, but my opinion on that too, because I made that observation as well. All of the hosts were female, and it's like, okay, cool. I'm not bothered about the fact that men are underrepresented. It's just not a thing that I'm into. I tend to do a bit of an internal eye roll when I hear those kinds of discussions. But what I find interesting about it is I wonder if because they're female, that somehow this is more of a pertinent issue for them. I didn't get the sense that it was a bee in their bonnet and we should sort of strike back because it's a male thing, even though they hit that card a couple of times. And I thought it was a cheap shot as far as men being coders and therefore their inherent bias comes out in the code. Just cheap shot. I just don't see the depth of a conversation there. But the fact that they were all female, I thought was interesting. Maybe there is something, and I'm speculating here, that says, we as mothers, we as people that I care in that sense, in a different way than men do, are concerned about something, and we're waving a flag, which I would commend them for if that's the flag that they're waving on it. Maybe there are differences, right?
So here's the thing. It bugged me a little bit that there were no men on the Coded Bias documentary. Bugged me a little bit. But I didn't let that take away from some of the stuff that was being done there. I really wanted to be non-biased about this. This wasn't about conservative or liberal, Republican or Democrat to me when I watched it. This was about technology. Can they back up the claims that they make? And I felt like they made a few very good cases. And in some cases, the argument was weak. But I think the biggest case that they made was around criminal justice.
Right. Let's talk about that.
I'm a history buff, and I'm also criminal justice. You guys, if you've tuned into the show, I talk about this quite often. So one of the things about facial DNA, facial recognition software, and the error rate takes me back to several of the documentaries that I've seen in the last several years on Netflix and Amazon Prime and elsewhere that talk about previous standards within law enforcement to convict people of crimes. So that 14-year-old kid at the end of Coded Bias, him crying and shaking made me cry and shake for him. Because imagine you're on your way to school. He wasn't dressed like a criminal, right?
School uniform on in England.
He was in school uniform. Facial recognition software marks you as a wanted man. 4 plainclothes police officers come and grab you and say, come with us. So now you're terrified. You don't know where you're at, right? The approach by the policemen at that time was, if they did that to my 14-year-old kid, I'd sue them.
Yeah.
Seriously, I would sue them.
Well, okay, so
but let me finish my point here real quick.
Okay.
Then they search the kid and detain him for 15 minutes. And then they go, sorry, the software got it wrong. So here's this 14-year-old kid going about his business. He may have never had an interaction with police prior to this one experience.
Right.
His first experience with police was this software read your face, said you were a wanted criminal. These cops come grab you, search you, detain you in front of your friends on a public street, treat you like you're a criminal, go and invade your privacy without a warrant, without anything. So imagine if the fingerprint scanner didn't work. And let's say, because they had a fingerprint scanner and that's how they let him go. Right? So now this kid gets arrested to go to central booking. right? So they put him in a police car, take him to a police station, book him. Kid misses school or misses his homework, goes through a traumatic experience because of that inaccuracy. I'm sorry, that is not good enough. I won't deal with that as a citizen.
So it's it is an error. If it's biased, then what needs to be proved is that kids of that age and that ethnic demographic are being stopped more than others. Then we will understand if it's a bias. I agree with you. This poor kid, I saw him crying. I'm just like, oh my God, that must have been scary for this poor 14-year-old. I'm not quite as outraged as you are on this one, because it's like it was a mistake, and it's not a nice mistake. I'm not saying it wasn't pleasant, but the police officers, and I didn't see them being overly abusive. I mean, certainly there's always improvement, right? Absolutely. But the police officers like, okay, this software that we've been given by head office, by dispatch, by whatever, and is now highlighting this person as a criminal. We have to stop them. So they engaged in conversation. Obviously, it was terrifying for a poor kid to talk to plain police officers, and he had to give up his fingerprint. That's not cool, but it did actually prove his innocence. And it was a case of mistaken identity. Not a fun thing at all, but I'm not quite in tears over it. I mean, I was detained at Ben Gurion Airport a few years ago.
Who hasn't been detained at Ben Gurion Airport? You're joining the long list of 2 million tourists every year that are detained at Ben Gurion Airport.
I was in one of those rooms that had no door handle on the inside, and the window with you could see the shadows on the other side. And it's because I'd entered into the country with 2 passports but didn't declare it. When I came in on my British passport, fine, no problem. And with my Canadian passport, I rented a car. But Eddie Doyle, the Canadian, wasn't officially in Israel. So the next morning when I was in the lineup, facial recognition software, by the way, and this was in 2008, picked me out of the lineup before I was even going to check into my flight. And a plainclothes guy and a guy with a big gun came up to me and said, Mr. Doyle, come with us. Not a pleasant experience. And I wasn't a 14-year-old. It would have been terrifying as a 14-year-old. But hey, mistakes like coming in with 2 passports or facial recognition, they happen, right? And that's life. And it's like,
so hang on. There's the idea of things happen. But if you're going to deploy this kind of technology on the street, you better make damn sure it's effective and accurate.
I'm with you. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Number one, I have another point I want to make. In Hong Kong, in China, they're using facial recognition software right now to identify protesters. That's why they go with lasers. They wear all these different masks and what. Free Hong Kong. I'm wearing yellow. I may wear the same shirt tomorrow on CISO Thursdays in solidarity with my people in Hong Kong. All right?
I agree with you there. What they're doing in Hong Kong is unbelievably bad. Yes.
Tyranny. It's tyranny. Yeah. We can't be silent about it. We can't be silent about it. In the U.S., 117 million citizens, American citizens, have their faces in a police database without consent, legal warrant, or anything else. 117 million Americans, that's the majority of adults in this country, have their faces without their consent in some sort of facial recognition.
Not cool.
Database. Right. In the US, there's no safeguards, there's no regulations. And this is where I get to the law enforcement piece. Right.
And this is a question about privacy of information, not bias. And I'm with you on this, right? It's up to me if I want to give up my face, and you, government.
But here's where the bias comes in. If this technology is only 6 to 8% accurate, I've got a crime, I've got a video, I pull someone's face, I take that person's face, I stick it up and I try to match it with my matching engine. All of a sudden comes the name James Azar. Right? For the sake of argument, I'll use myself. Right. All of a sudden, I'm sitting in my house, watching TV. All of a sudden, I see cops around my house, come knocking on my door, going like, hey, man, you're wanted for robbery. What? I don't know what you're talking about. They rip my house apart. They shred it to pieces with a search warrant, right? They arrest me, right?
All bad, not bias, but all bad based on.
But again, but the technology is flawed.
Yes,
and that's the great, and it's being used. And so this has happened to people, and people have had to go. People who may have not had the means to defend themselves, meaning they can't afford a good lawyer.
Right.
They don't know their rights. They're unaware of what's going on. How many people are in jail right now because of bad facial recognition technology. How many people have been accused and maybe have lost their job, maybe could have had a record that has destroyed their ability to go to a good school?
It's because of that. All bad. Let's get to some comments. But exactly, that's all bad. Again, I'm not seeing bias, but I'm seeing a faulty system that shouldn't be used unless it's bloody perfect. Shouldn't be used, in my opinion, right? But let's get okay.
So hey, Nora, happy that you're here with us today. What if a fraternity had something illegal in his pocket? Would it be free? That's a really good thing. What if that kid did have like a little joint? Now, all of a sudden, on a fake basis, he gets a criminal record and his life gets destroyed because of flawed technology.
Right. Flawed technology, bad.
Shlomo Buckman says, as a conservative, the one thing that scares me is the case we were talking about just a little bit ago. Paul says, imagine if you resisted arrest. Right.
Bad.
Matt smiling about that, and he's agreeing with it.
They were laughing about me being detained in Israel. Yeah.
Not to mention what was scraped from an OSNet without validation of that data set. Absolutely.
Can you explain that, please? What is OSNet? Explain that, James.
So the police departments will go in and they'll scrape a bunch of data. And now they get your facial recognition, right? And they'll look, and let's say the facial recognition software only gets your face at 68%, right? And they go and they see, oh, there's 4 matches. And now they start to look at all of your OSNet data, like essentially your online activity and everything else. And without validating any of that data set, without any sort of validations, you can have cops already. It's like when SolarWinds happened and everyone said screaming Russia, Russia, Russia. Yours truly was saying, don't buy the Russian story, and don't buy them now, folks. Don't buy the Russian stories you're seeing in the news now. It's a distraction. It's a media distraction trying to take us away from China. Focus on China. Talk about China, 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 China. Let it sink in your heads. This, without validating data sets, without knowing what they're scraping, and then using bad technology is not cool, man. Too many people are in jail right now because of this flaw. My good friend Lisa says, nice discussion. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
It's great to have you join us today. And this is John De La Cruz, the man who started this Paisley. John, I would like your comment on the shirt today. I know it's not the shirt you sent me, but I hope I didn't, overstep here. But Mr. De La Cruz, please, your approval is required. But he says, would having people of a specific demographic part of an AI software development help reduce that error rate?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Right, that's my point. I think you need a bigger data set to get the algorithms working properly. Now, by the way, I don't think we should be doing this with police officers, right? That my whole point is that it's erroneous, right? It's too flawed. There's too many potentials for mistakes. But if you're going to do it, then yes, increase the data set. I don't think it's a matter of bias. I think it's simply a matter that the algorithms need to learn.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So the algorithm is false, and now you says I don't want cops to use it. What's your feeling about corporations?
Yeah, because obviously I've said that I don't mind my company taking my picture to get into my building, right? But that's just to access my building. The whole thing with the 14-year-old boy is really interesting. So what happened, ladies and gentlemen, in this documentary, real quick, this 14-year-old kid's walking down the street, and in England, they have these trucks, and they have cameras on top, and they have facial recognition sensors in these cameras. England has the biggest CCTV downtown in London. I mean, the espionage is unbelievable. It's really big brother over there. So they have these vans, and this school child, and in England, we wear school uniforms, this school child was walking down the street and got stopped. Scary moment for him. So that was the scenario. And what I don't like is exactly what everybody put. It's scary because what if this poor kid had a joint in his pocket? What if this poor kid just said, hey, piss off, you're plainclothes people. I don't even believe you're cops. It could have gone really bad. So that's why I don't like the whole idea of law enforcement using it right now, because it's not perfected. When it's perfected, I'm not opposed to it.
I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it, and I'm opposed to it, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
One, London, who we call a democracy, has as many cameras as Beijing, China, or Shanghai, or Guangzhou, or Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Right? To me, that level of surveillance on people is insane. And they say it in the name of terror, and that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
So that's one challenge. I think the second piece of it is when you look at not trusting police with it or perfecting it, it goes to corporations. That's scarier. And Paul says this, yeah, let's trust corporations more than police. And that's the thing. I would trust police more than I would corporations, because with police as a voter, I've got a say, right? I can run for office. I can push legislation. I can lobby. Corporations or private businesses, they're getting all this information and they're doing whatever they want with it. It's funny because we're talking about bias with tech today, and I can tell that on one social network right now, right, is really bogging down our traffic. We typically have double the amount of viewers. Very interesting. From this one streaming network we're streaming on today. So very, very interesting to me is the idea of talking about bias in technology, because the idea of bias in technology is really big to me, because these companies are taking this information, it's unchecked, they have it, and are using it to sell this data to law enforcement without your consent.
Right. That's okay. So to clarify what I mean by using my corporation, let's say to use my face to access my building, I actually don't have a problem with that, because I've given permission for that. But if Facebook is taking my face and doing anything with it that I haven't given permission for, that I have a problem with as far as corporations go. So it's not a carte blanche, most certainly. But I do think that because the consequence for mistaken identity in legal cases and wrongful imprisonment is so massive that I would want to see law enforcement, I would want to see the algorithms perfected before law enforcement is really engaging with them. And then I'm fine with it. I really am. Once we got a 99% success rate, I say roll it out.
Okay, so we're going to get to John De La Cruz, who says it's just as ugly. He loves it anyway, folks. I'm wearing Paisley and not my traditional black t-shirt in order to support the Wounded Warrior Project in our CISO Talk Paisley shirt challenge that was born on this show 2 weeks ago, right? 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So 3 weeks ago, this idea came through. Within a week, we put out a fundraiser. The fundraiser has been live for 2 weeks. We're at $2,651. Please go and donate. Any donation that you give goes directly to the Wounded Warrior Project. I don't see the money. Eddie doesn't see the money. We're not slicing anything off top. This is to support the brave men and women who do everything to defend our freedoms and our nation. And times are not getting easier, where we're looking at more and more potential conflict. And even though our boys are coming home, they're might be facing a mightier enemy. And so we need to support these brave men and women as well. So please go and donate now. Paul says this, it's right up there with the top 10 cities around the world with the most cameras. That's why I don't go to the city of Atlanta. I don't trust the city of Atlanta.
No stopping it though. It's happening, Paul. You're right. It's happening all over the place. So but look at these next. Yeah. Okay. Keep going. If power shifts, the data set can be used for the training
for a social credit score system. So imagine the city of Atlanta deems you right as you're walking because you're the guy who takes his gum out of his wrapper and throws the wrapper on the floor, or you throw it into the sewer, right? And you're the guy who clogs up the sewer sometimes, right? So imagine you clog that up, and all of a sudden your social credit score goes down, and now the city of Atlanta says you've got to pay a higher tax because you're a higher expense as a citizen.
Yeah, go onto Netflix and watch the Black Mirror episode called Nosedive. It's all about your social credit score. It's a brilliant episode, Nosedive on Black Mirror. But look at Shlomo's comment here. This is super interesting. To go back to bias, it depends who creates the algorithm. You must have closed control over the people who develop the algorithm.
Shlomo's absolutely right. I mean, but I think that's what the documentary really brings into place in Netflix, is the idea that there's no oversight over AI algorithms. And when you ask people to talk about their algorithms or their AIs or their machine learning engines, and you go, how does it work?
Right.
Listen, I sat with a vendor yesterday, sales pitch, right? This guy's getting a call with me. I gave him 30 minutes. We were done in 15. You know why? Because I asked him, they go, we use AI. I was like, how does your AI work?
Yeah, well, most sales dudes just wouldn't know. Yeah, crickets. Yeah.
Crickets. I was like, how does the engine operate? They don't know. So Matt says Facebook is certainly doing just that. They are hiring people to try to understand the slang in Messenger so they can better understand conversations. That's why I went off of WhatsApp, right? Because even though they say it's end-to-end encryption and we don't see your messages, bullshit. I can prove you wrong. I can I'll go buy a phone. Let's do an experiment, right? I'm going to go and buy a phone and a new phone line, and I'm going to open a new email address, and I'm going to use a VPN, and I'm going to create this whole new virtual identity, right? Let's do this project, right? Let's take this on, and we'll prove Matt's point right here. We'll download Messenger. 4 people will start messaging each other. Let's see what happens on our Facebook feed.
Right.
Because I guarantee you they're reading and scraping those messages. Black Mirror is scarily
fellow Black Mirror fan. Yeah, those were amazing episodes. They did a very, very good job of that. Yeah.
So is anything by Philip K. Dyke. You cannot be too paranoid.
Oh, really?
And they will recognize you within 2 weeks, according to Paul. Yeah, Facebook would recognize you within much less than 2 weeks. Much, much quicker. And Shlomo here says, people become very defensive when you try to find out how they created this algorithm. Right. But that's part of it. So we've got about 6-7 minutes left in the show. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about the conclusion of it, where they talked about regulation and they did the whole AOC, Jim Jordan, and they had the late John Lewis on there. So this documentary was obviously done pre-COVID because no one was masked in those parts of the documentary. And it was obviously still when President Trump was in office. So I think, but I want to address this whole idea of government regulation on AI and algorithm. I think that was the dumbest thing in that entire documentary. So I'm not a government guy. I want small government, stay the hell out of my business. I think that AI and algorithms is a competitive marketplace, right? And we're seeing that now. So Facebook, Twitter, Reddit have seen an decrease in traffic as people now Parler's back on the Apple App Store, right? There's Frank, this new social media platform, Clubhouse. There's all these different platforms that are competing. So this competition is seriously helping change the way these things go. Now, I want Twitter to crash and burn. Let this be here. This guy will throw a huge block party the day Twitter crash lands and burns.
Okay.
I will. I've said it right here on the show. Hold me to it. I despise Twitter. I think Twitter is what's wrong with humanity today. Twitter and the media. They're right in it together. And we saw that with Project Veritas and the CNN expose. As soon as they started putting CNN on blast, all of a sudden James O'Keefe was off of Twitter, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're horrific. I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely. So here's where I see this going, though. I see this being a free competition kind of thing, because the companies that are going to come out and say, here's how our AI engine works, and we have complete transparency. Here's a video. The consumers, the people who care, are going to go there. And we're starting to see people do that, right? We're starting to see that companies are starting to realize they can no longer play these games anymore. The citizens are educated. People are more technological than they were 10 years ago. We all work in technology today in some form or fashion. So I think competition is where it needs to be. I don't know that government regulation is the right move.
No, I mean, because as a libertarian, I'm opposed to government regulation in general anyway, because, I put it this way, be very slow to intervene. When I speak to government, it's like, be just really slow, because as soon as you start stirring the pot, the ripple effects you're not going to be able to control. Case in point, we recently banned plastic bags in our local supermarkets in the town I live in. Cool, it's great, right? So the Environmental Commission went in there, banned plastic bags. Nice. What they didn't anticipate is that the shops would then sell for $1 a really thick bag that you could reuse over and over again. Nothing wrong with that, Eddie. Why are you going to complain about this? Here's why. Because people in my, let's call it a slightly more affluent neighborhood, they'll just buy one of these bags every time. And then somebody did a study which showed that you would have to shop 18,000 times in order for that one thick plastic bag to replace all of the thin plastic bags you would have bought over in 18,000 shops. The average human being shops 11,000 times. It's more than you would in a lifetime. So what they actually did was increased plastic production and increased waste. So the genesis, the intent is beautiful always, right? The result is typically erroneous of perfection. So with the algorithms, though, yeah, I mean, look, I'm just going to ratify your position on that one, James. And also governments don't know. I mean, look, I'm not necessarily sticking up for Zuckerberg on this one, but you remember when he was hauled in front of Congress last year, or was it the year before? The stupid questions that these politicians were asking him. You just and he was even he had even more of a dumbfounded look on his face. I mean, they don't know. And so how can you expect these people to make an accurate decision on a technology that we even struggle, us technologists, right? Us propeller heads even struggle to understand. So I say stay out of it, and don't do this then, right? So just press pause on law enforcement and on government entities using artificial intelligence. That's the only thing you need to do. Just don't interfere with private industry. Right, just limit.
So yeah, I mean, you have a point there. I think if I look at this from a perspective of what government should be doing, is government should give the citizen its full legal right to take any action against a company that violates its rights. So what government should do is say, here's all this technology. Here's the thing. You want to use this technology on the citizens? The citizens have a right to one of three things. Refuse to participate and still have access to the service. Because if your service is considered like social media platform, a means of communication, you can't say, if you don't agree to Facebook's terms and conditions, you can't be on Facebook. You should get a redacted version of Facebook, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm into that too. We've spoken about that.
So that's number one. Number two, you should have a right to all your data.
Right. Absolutely. You should have a right to know where your data's going, gone, been.
Correct.
Because it's you.
Right.
It's your digital footprint. It's like I lived in England. I've got a right to know, and I do know what happened with me when I was living over there and when I was living in Canada. I've got a right to know that if my data is going to China and I'm being advertised to, I need to know this.
Right.
That's right.
I think that's really important. And number three, you should have the right to sue anyone who violates your right. They should have zero immunity from the law, right? So Section 230 doesn't apply to these kinds of organizations. Correct. And I think if you do that, you create fair competition. Now, I think our government is too stupid to do this, but nonetheless, it might be. It might be something that the government could do. Shlomo says, I agree with James. Let the free market have the companies compete for their place in the market. Sure. Matt says, amen, James. Paul has now joined us on LinkedIn. He goes, when you are the product, you should know. Yes. And on these social media platforms, we are the product. And so we're entitled to know.
Yeah. And I think, people like us know, to be sure. And I used to have that joke, which was slightly mean, which is basically telling people who are surprised that their data is being monetized. That's kind of like the cow complaining how the state gets served. We're the cow. But it's more than a right to know. It's a right to control. It's a right to control where my face, my iris, my fingerprint is going. That's kind of what I mean by right to know. It's like it's a right to say, no, I don't want it to go over there, Facebook. Let's get some more comments, and then I think we better wrap soon. This is great.
Yes, we are. So final few comments here. Shlomo says, Matt, academia is the worst place to purchase anything. It might be, but it's also the place where you get really good stuff for cheap. And so and Paul is multi-platforming. Is that similar to double fisting drinks at a bar?
There you go. Yeah, maybe.
Right.
He also made a comment on my amazing plastic bags. You're absolutely right. It's a really good plastic bag. Only I bought too many.
It is. It's a very good plastic bag. You might be right. I will say that. But again, with plastic bags and your example of plastic bags, that just shows you how inefficient government really is. Because they never really do a full-fledged study. They want a virtue signal. They want to do something because a bunch of people have some social media clout and a bunch of followers get something and they go, oh, this is, in Israel, they do it very smart. They charge you per plastic bag. And so it's 10 plastic bags, they charge you 10 cents a bag, you pay an extra $1.
Right.
All right. So now people are like, I don't need 10 bags. Pack everything in 5.
Right.
So it is what it is. Paul's always double fisting while drinking. I love it. All right, folks. We're wrapping up today's show. Thank you so much for everyone who's watched us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This show is live every single week on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here. So you can tune in, hang out with us. Next week, I think we're going to be talking, and I'll tell you right now, I've got the thing right here. Facebook's election social experiment in 2010. How they got this is also part of the movie, and we didn't get to it today. I had it on my notes, but I think this is something that we should look at in AI, and we'll continue our series in AI next week because I think it sparked a conversation. So next week we'll continue our series on AI. Make sure to follow myself and Eddie on LinkedIn if you haven't yet. Make sure to follow the CyberHub podcast page. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll be live with the Tech Town Square, with the practitioner brief at 7:30 a.m. Eastern. I'll be on the other side of cyber with the awesome JJ for our APAC show. So it's 7:30 a.m. here. But if you wake up that early and you want to tune in, we're going to have a great show tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. You can find it on the CyberHub podcast page or on the YouTube page as well. You can catch us there. And then what else? And then CISO Thursday tomorrow at 1 p.m. for those who tune into the podcast I do with the awesome Naomi Buckwalter and my sister from another Mr. Renee Small and my brother from another mother, Chris. The four of us will be chatting tomorrow a little bit about gatekeepers. That's 1 p.m. on Renee Small's LinkedIn page. So you don't want to miss it. I'll be also supporting a Paisley on the show tomorrow. So don't miss it. You won't want to miss it, and definitely something to keep an eye on. And then tomorrow night, CISO Talk with Ron Green and Robin Bienefy. Ron Green's the CSO over at MasterCard, and Robin Bienefy is the former CIO at AT&T and one of my great, great friends. We'll be doing a preview for a fireside chat we'll have on next week, so don't miss that CISO Talk episode. That's it for us here, folks. James Azar signing off. Eddie, take us away, buddy.
Fantastic. Let's donate to Wounded Warrior, get James into an even uglier shirt for next week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for everything you've done so far. Love all the comments. Keep them coming. Reach out anytime. Suggest subject matters for us to take on. I think the AI thing's got legs, so we'll discuss it again next week. If there's things you want to discuss, just bring it to us over LinkedIn and we'll get it on. All right. Be safe, everybody.